Hello there, you're watching Dansky, the place to be to develop your creative skills and grow as a designer. In this tutorial, we're going to be learning how to create a lightning text effect in Adobe Photoshop. So to start with, I've created a new document, 1920 pixels wide, 1080 pixels high. Now before we start, you're going to want to do a couple of things. I'd recommend downloading a very jaggy, sharp-edged, lightning-esque font. You can use a different font if you'd like, but using something like this will create a better lightning effect. So I'll link this in the description. It's on 1001fonts.com and it's called Fighting Spirit. Also, we're going to need some lightning brushes. Now you can search these on Google and there are plenty out there. The ones I'm going to be using for this tutorial are by Ghost Fighter on DeviantArt, and I'll also link this below in the description. So first, go ahead and download the font and then install it as you would normally, whether you are on Mac or PC. And then if you download the lightning brushes as well, and then what you should get is a .abr file. And then if you select the brush tool in Photoshop, click on this little arrow up here in the top left corner to select your brush. And then from the cog in the top right, select that and go down to load brushes, navigate to the .abr file, and then select it and it will load the brushes into Photoshop and they will appear at the bottom here. Okay, so once you've got your font sorted and your lightning brushes, we are ready to go. So let's select black as our foreground color, select the fill tool, and we'll just add some black in there. Next, we're going to select the text tool, left click anywhere on the artboard, and you can type your word. For this tutorial, it's going to be lightning. And I'm going to make this white. And then go to edit, down to free transform, and then hold shift to scale this up. And I'm going to position this in the center. And as you can see, I've selected the Fighting Spirit font. Now next, we're going to go into our layers palette, right click on the lightning layer and select blending options. Now on the blending options screen, you'll see fill opacity. We're just going to drag that slider from 100% all the way down to 0, so your text should disappear. Next, if you select stroke and select the stroke color as a very, very light blue, so there's a little bit of blue, but it's not quite white, something like this. And then we can thicken this up a little bit. And then we can also go to outer glow, just select that. And we can up the opacity here and adjust the size as you like. This is going to give our lightning a little bit of a glow. And you can click on the swatch here and adjust the color as well. So something like this. When you're happy, you can click OK. Now next, what we're going to do is we're going to start using our lightning brushes. So if we create a new layer, and select your brush tool and select white as your foreground color. Load up your brushes menu by clicking up here on the little arrow and then just pick one of the brushes that you've installed and you can adjust the size here and then just left click anywhere on the artboard. Now it's added this brush onto this layer, so we can turn this on and off. We can also go to edit and free transform and we can move this around and we can resize it. Now the aim of what we're about to do now is we want to try and add the lightning along the lines of the letters, so it looks like the letters themselves are electrified. So let's try this now with the first letter. Let's just line this lightning up so that it runs along the edge or the left edge of the L there. So when you're happy with your free transform, you can double click that. Now what we can do is we don't need all of the lightning. We don't need this bit at the bottom with the glow. So we can actually add a mask to this lightning layer. select your brush tool again, and if you have black selected as your foreground color, you will paint into the mask and remove the lightning, and you can press X to quickly swap your black and white foreground and background colors, and it will paint it back in. So it's very easy to switch between black and white and then remove something or add it to your mask. Now you can select a different brush to do this. You can go back up to the top and select a feathered brush, or you can use the lightning brush, or you can use anything you like. Remember, you can adjust the size of your brush very quickly by using these square brackets left and right. So they will reduce or increase the size of the brush. And with black selected and the mask selected, we're just going to paint into this. So you can see this soft feathered brush tool is quite handy at just removing the bits of lightning that we don't really want. And we can paint a few bits back in there. So this extends a little bit too far up. Let's just shorten that. So there we go, we've sufficiently electrified that left edge. So let's create a new layer. And let's pick another lightning brush, and we're going to repeat this. As you can see, that's a bit big there, so let's just bring the size of that brush down. Let's try something a little bit different. There we go. So we can scale this down using Edit and then Free Transform. And then rotate. You can rotate from the edges. And just line this up. The edges of your letters. Double click to set that in place. Add the layer mask. Make sure you've got black selected and whichever brush you like, either a lightning brush or a soft feathered brush at the top. That's one of Photoshop's defaults. And we can just paint into the mask and remove what we don't like. Once again, you can press X to swap the foreground and background color, and you can paint this back in if you want. Swap it over and remove it. So it's much less final than using something like the eraser tool. Once you erase it, it's gone for good. Whereas this, you can paint it back in, you can remove it. So it gives you a bit more flexibility. So we can create a new layer now and use another lightning brush, or what we can do is just duplicate one of the layers we've created. So let's right click this and duplicate layer. Just click OK to confirm that. The shortcut for that is Command J on the Mac or Control J on the PC. Now when we're duplicating lightning, we don't want the lightning to look just like we've copied it and repeated it. So what I've done here is I've rotated this 180 degrees. So if your lightning that you're using has any very distinctive bits and you copy that and duplicate it 5 or 6 times across this one piece of text, it will look a little bit copied and pasted. So we want to try and create as much original lightning for each letter as possible. So these two bits here, these last two layers that I created, they are the same shape, just rotated, but to look at, you wouldn't necessarily notice. So let's duplicate that again and go to Edit, Free Transform, and just move this out. Let's see if we can get away with another one of these. Just adjust the angle there. And we'll just electrify that letter I. Okay, so let's make a new layer. Let's pick some different lightning now, just so we're not repeating the same lightning over and over again. Let's try... try something else. Okay, possibly this one. So again, we're just going to shrink this down in size and just line this bit of lightning up here with the left edge of the N. Add that layer mask. Go back up and select the feathered brush. Make sure black is your foreground color. And we're just going to remove all of the lightning that we don't need. You can have a few bits of lightning coming off if you like. And let's duplicate that layer again. And just see if we can repeat this anywhere else. If we can rotate it and get away with using it again. So I'm going to use it here again on the other edge of the N. However, this fork shape at the bottom, these two pieces here, are very similar to these, even though they're rotated. So what I'm going to do is select the layer mask, select the brush tool, and just remove those. It just looks a little bit too similar. So I'm using the same piece of lightning, but just a different part of it. So something like this. And let's see if we can select some previously created lightning layers, and we can move these out as well. Possibly rotate them. And you can do this as many times as you like. You can add as much lightning as you like. And as you become familiar with this, you'll get very quick at just adding the lightning and tweaking it and masking different pieces of lightning off. Let's have some going across the top of the T here. Now this T has got a slight curve on it. So with this lightning layer selected, we can go to Edit, Transform, and Warp, and let's see if we can curve that a little bit. So you've got the presets up here, so let's just try and arc that. And you can adjust the bend here. So we're just going to try and curve it a little bit if we can. Let's try arch. No, let's go back to arc. Press enter once you've finished. Let's see if we can curve that just a little bit, just so it sits on that T a bit more closely. So something like that could work. And again, I'm going to duplicate that layer and then free transform, rotate it, and possibly use this for part of the G as well. And again, duplicate. And use that again for this G. And then in the layer mask itself, I'm just going to rub a little bit out and bring a bit more in, just so it's a little bit different. So the two Gs don't look the same, even though they do use the same piece of lightning. So like I said, you can do this as many times as you like until your text is as electrified as you like. Once you're happy with that, what you can do is right click on the first text layer we created, go to blending options, select color overlay, and it's remembered that light blue color from before. You can keep that color or select a new one if you like. Go to outer glow. It's remembered that from before as well. It does look a bit odd there. So let's just adjust the colors here. Reduce the spread, I think. Bring that down to 0. And then adjust the glow. Adjust the opacity. So we still want to give it a nice subtle glow. And you can adjust the different effects if you like. You've got some contour effects down here that give you slightly different glow effects. So I think we're going to stick with these settings here and click OK. And then what you can do is right click on that layer, go to copy layer style, then hold shift and select your top layer, and then right click again and select paste layer style. And it will apply that same effect to all of your pieces of lightning that we've added. And then we can click the arrow at the end of the layer here just to collapse all of these. Next, what we're going to do is add a background. So we can select all of these layers holding shift and then press Command G on the Mac or Control G on the PC to group these into a layer, and we'll just call this group text. It just helps us keep everything a lot tidier. And then select your background layer and just click the new layer icon in the layers palette. Make sure that you have black selected as your foreground color, and then you can go to filter, down to render, and just select clouds, and it will add some default Photoshop clouds in there, or you can use a background of your choice. And then if you go to layer, new adjustment layer, and down to hue and saturation, just click OK. And then tick the colorize box. You can then adjust the hue until you get a blue shade similar to your lightning. The saturation, so how blue do you really want this to look? And then you can adjust the lightness, and we're going to bring this right down. So we want this to be a very subtle background. We want to keep the text our focal point here. And then right click on that adjustment layer and select create clipping mask, and you'll see this little arrow appear on the left. So what that does is it means that this adjustment layer, I can toggle that on and off. That darkened blue effect will only apply to this layer. So let's just call this clouds. Next, what we can do is we can create a new layer and select a foreground color. Let's select another blue, a nice bright blue color. And with a nice soft feathered brush, we can just draw in some blue. You can see that it's positioned it underneath the hue and saturation layer, so it's got that arrow. We don't want that, so what we need to do is just drag this above the hue and saturation layer, and there we go. We can see that blue color wash that we've added, and we can adjust the position of this if we like. I'm actually going to create a new layer and select a darker shade of blue. And you can see it's got this arrow again, so we can right click that. We really don't want that to relate to our clouds layer, and we can go release clipping mask. So these two here, the clouds and the hue and saturation layer, are separate. So we can actually select both of these and just lock those layers. We don't want to select them anymore. So anyway, back to our new layer. I've got my darker shade of blue, and I'm going to add this over here on the left. And then you can play around with this as much as you like. So you can select the blending options, and you can select overlay, or you can select screen, lots of other different options, and you can adjust the opacity. So this is where you can get really, really creative. What we can also do is if we select our darkest blue layer at the top, just create a new layer, select the gradient tool, and just click up here and select the gradient here that goes from a color through to transparency. Now if you double click on this left color and select black and click OK, and make sure you have radial selected as the type of gradient, left click in the center and drag out and let go, and it will add this vignette effect around the edge. And then again, you can apply some effects. So I've gone with overlay here. You can choose a whole bunch of different effects depending on what you're looking for, and you can reduce the opacity again and get as creative as you like. So I'm going to add one more layer in here. It's above the dark blue one. This is going to be a much lighter blue again. And I'm going to set the blending mode as screen and just bring that down. So we can see it starting to come together. However, there's a bit more work that we can do on the actual lettering to make it look more like lightning. So if we go into our layers palette and expand our text group, right click on your original lightning text layer, go to blending options, and we can probably reduce the stroke down in size a little bit, so it's a little bit thinner and a bit closer to the lightning that we've added around it. We can then go to the outer glow, and we could reduce the opacity so it's not as visible just adjust this slightly. So there's a bit more focus on the lightning itself. Something else we can also do is select above our vignette layer, that's layer 6 here, and just make sure that you have black as the fill color and just click to add some black. So you can see our lightning effect a lot more now, and we can just reduce the opacity of this very slightly. So it's a bit darker, and again it puts more focus on the lettering and the lightning effect itself. So let's group all of these background layers into a folder. So just select all of them and just click on the folder icon, or press Command G on the Mac or Control G on the PC, and we'll just call this BG, and we'll lock this group. So now we can see our lightning lettering, we can select the layers, and we can do a little bit more work. So let's duplicate these again and go back to duplicating and rotating, just so they can look a little bit more electrified in places. So something like this. So I'm just duplicating, resizing very slightly, and just reusing the same lightning assets that I've already used. And you can create new lightning if you like. As long as it doesn't look too copy and pasted, you should be able to get away with it. I think we're going to need a little bit more on the G. So let's go and create a new layer. Select white as our foreground color, and then select one of our lightning brushes. Something with a bit of a curve on it. Let's try making this one a bit smaller. And let's see if we can use this to electrify this G. So again, I'm going to try and line this up with the curve along the top edge of the G. Oh, perfect. There we go. That's brilliant. So let's create a new layer mask. Again, select our brush tool. We want that soft feathered brush at the top. And I'm just going to actually paint out everything and then swap the foreground and the background color and just paint it back in along that edge there. This one's got a bit of a glow around it with this brush. So I'm just going to cut into that a little bit more so we don't get that glow. And then I can right click on any of the other lightning layers, click copy layer style, right click on the new layer and select paste layer style, and it will add that glow. And then I can just duplicate that, drag that across for the G at the other end, possibly bring the opacity down slightly, anything I can do to make it slightly different so it doesn't look like I've copy and pasted it. And on this first G here, I'm actually going to duplicate that again and just rotate it 180 degrees or so. And I'm also going to run this along the bottom edge just to create more of a difference between this and the G at the end. And I'm going to duplicate it again actually, and I will use this on the G at the end, but in a slightly different position. So I'm going to use this just on the bottom left corner of the G, and selecting the mask, I'm just going to paint some of this out. And let's just select this layer here, we'll duplicate that. And rotate this around. Possibly reduce this in size. So again, we're just going to line it up with that letter. And I think the L, if we just duplicate the first bit of lightning that we created, and we'll position this along the bottom of the L. And just select the mask and remove a couple of bits there. And then possibly one more for the letter N. And we've got a random bit of something there, so let's just select that mask, just remove that. So there we go, we've electrified our text. What we can do as well is select the lightning text layer again and just press Command J on the Mac or Control J on the PC to duplicate that layer. And we can just use the arrow keys to move this to the right a couple of pixels, and we can duplicate it again. And just rotate it very, very slightly. Maybe bring the opacity down. And we'll just remove the effects from it, just to thicken up these letters and make it look, make sure we keep the stroke on actually, just to make it look like there's current coming off them. You don't want to move it too far, it will make the lettering quite difficult to read if it looks something like this, but just enough that it throws it off. So duplicate, very slight rotation, adjust the opacity if you like, and it just helps make the text look a little bit more randomized. And one other thing we can look at doing is if we go back into our layers palette, and if we right click on our text layers and click Convert to Smart Object, and then we can mess around with some of the blending modes a little bit more. Usually it won't let you apply a blending mode to something that already has blending options, so just be mindful of that. So again, let's right click some of the other text layers and just try some different blending options. Using things like screen, overlay and soft light are what I'm using a lot in this tutorial. So feel free to experiment with some of the different effects. So right click, Convert to Smart Object, and it will then let us apply those blending options. And we can try a few different ones. I think hard light. And you can adjust the opacity, or you could select all of them and hit duplicate to strengthen them all up. And we can actually select the lightning layers above by holding Shift. Let's just use that arrow on the right to collapse these, and I can select group, and I'm going to call this group lightning and just move that to the top. So just drag that above the text group, and then we can duplicate this group, and you'll see that it intensifies the lightning effect. We can also duplicate that group again and again, and you can do this as many times as you like, and it will amplify that lightning effect. And what we can actually do is select these last four that we've duplicated, right click, go to Convert to Smart Object, apply a layer mask to that, so you can toggle this on and off now. And then we can paint into this with another lightning brush. So make sure that you have black selected as your foreground color. And we can actually paint into this. So we're removing a lot of the lightning, but kind of leaving little pieces. And then you can switch that round so the fill is white. And just apply some more. We're just going to bring the intensity down on a couple of points. So there's a couple of parts of the lightning that are very intense. Let's just bring this down a little bit. So you kind of get these shards all around the edge, which are quite nice. These like fragments of lightning. And this may take a little bit of playing around, just brushing into that mask and then brushing out of it. Using different brushes, or the feather brush or the lightning brushes, like so. And it's also a good way to just add a few more bits of lightning. So we added a lot of lightning in this tutorial manually. This is a good way to just get lots of little bits of lightning around the edge. And you can make the brush a lot smaller if you like. And then there's a couple of places that I think are missing some lightning altogether, so we can go back in and we can just complete these. So at the moment the H looks a bit out of place. It's a little bit barren. So again, I'm just duplicating the lightning, rotating it, and then lining it up with the edges of the letters. And with something like this, it all becomes so chaotic that it's actually quite hard to see which pieces of lightning have been duplicated and which haven't. Which is great because it means that we can reuse the lightning rather than doing every single letter individually. So once you're happy with your lightning, there we go, just a few fragments there. And we've also got these extra little fragments around the edge as well. So these are where we've used the lightning brush and then we've masked it out. But I actually quite like these. They look like little sort of details, little shards of lightning that have just kind of escaped in the background. So I'm going to leave those there. Let's just bring this top layer inside our lightning layer. Then we can collapse that and we have our layers all neatly tucked away. So we can turn our lightning off and then turn it back on. And there we go, we've created an awesome lightning text effect in Adobe Photoshop. As always guys, please feel free to leave any questions or comments down below. Like this video if you enjoyed it, take care, and I'll see you next time.